Western society heavily aligns with existentialist principles. From a very young age, we are instilled with the importance of accountability and taking responsibility for our actions. This perspective stems from the very existentialist concept of free will, which suggests that individuals make choices independently or semi-independently of past events. This assumption bleeds into many important facets of our society, most notably our legal system, which is designed to enforce moral values by punishing those who act immorally. However, this system of punishment relies on the assumption of free will. In contrast to existentialism, there exists a philosophical standpoint known as hard determinism. This perspective posits that all events, including human behavior, are predetermined by preceding events, negating the concept of free will and, consequently, personal responsibility. There exists a third philosophical position called soft determinism, or compatibilism, but that is not relevant to this discussion as it isn't covered by the show that I'll be talking about. The debate between existentialism and determinism has lasted a long time. While existentialism has won out in most of the modern world, determinism does pose an interesting challenge to our criminal justice system and entire mindset surrounding moral responsibility. Can we truly hold people accountable and punish them for their actions? The Netflix sitcom BoJack Horseman, launched in 2014, delves into this very question through its main character, BoJack Horseman, a 50-year-old, self-loathing, drug-addicted, and faded Hollywood star. BoJack embarks on a philosophical journey, grappling with the concept of accepting personal responsibility in spite of circumstance. From the very beginning of the show, BoJack and personal responsibility were like oil and water.
I'm responsible for my own happiness. I can't even be responsible for my own breakfast.
He hated the idea that he was responsible for the choices he made. Shortly after Diane published his memoir, BoJack asks her,
I mean, am I just doomed to be the person that I am? The person in that book? I know that I can be selfish and narcissistic and self-destructive, but underneath all that, deep down, I'm a good person and I need you to tell me that I'm good. Diane, tell me, please, Diane, tell me that I'm good.
He is afraid of what 20th century French philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre called radical freedom. He believed that there is no meaning or purpose to our lives other than what our freedom creates. See, there are two main schools of thought when it comes to our purpose, also called our essence. The first is creationism, which believes that essence precedes existence. For example, humans created knives with one sole purpose in mind: cutting things. Similarly, creationists believe that a god, capital G, or gods, lowercase g, created humans with a purpose in mind. On the flip side, we have existentialism, the school of thought that Sartre subscribed to, which believed that existence precedes essence. Sartre, and others like him, believe that humans and horsemen exist just because. Unlike a knife, there is no predestined purpose that BoJack is meant to fulfill. There was nothing forcing him to make moves on both of his best friends' girlfriends, or strangle his co-star after abusing a cocktail of drugs, or attempt to sleep with an underage girl after being rejected by her mother. As Sartre puts it,
man is condemned to be free, condemned because he did not create himself, yet is nevertheless at liberty, and from the moment he is thrown into this world he is responsible for everything he does. The existentialist does not believe in the power of passion. He will never agree that a sweeping passion is a ravaging torrent which fatally leads a man to certain acts and is therefore an excuse. He thinks that man is responsible for his passion.
Or as the show presents it,
that's the thing. I don't think I believe in deep down. I kind of think all you are is just the things that you do.
Well, that's depressing.
And yeah, that's kind of it. No matter how traumatic his childhood was, no matter if he was under the influence of drugs or alcohol, or if he was depressed or angry, at the end of the day, BoJack Horseman was the one who made the choices to do all of the terrible things that BoJack Horseman has done. There is no good BoJack deep down. There is only BoJack, a culmination of every choice he has made so far. Or, as Todd puts it,
you are all the things that are wrong with you. It's not the alcohol or the drugs or any of the shitty things that happened to you in your career or when you were a kid. It's you. All right? It's you.
And that really is the depressing truth. BoJack bears the blame for everything, good or bad, that he has ever done. He is everything that is wrong with him. But as depressing as it may seem, this mentality does offer BoJack some hope. Yes, he is condemned to be responsible for everything that he has done, but he also has the freedom to change himself and the future actions he takes. But only he can take the necessary steps.
It's never too late to be the person you want to be. You need to choose the life you want. That'll be.
The show uses water as a clever metaphor to represent BoJack's radical freedom. At many points during the show, BoJack finds himself overwhelmed and engulfed by water. It is portrayed as this terrifying and oppressive force that threatens to drag BoJack down into the depths. The symbolism is so important that it is even part of the opening credits scene. But it's not until the episode Fish Out of Water, when the ledge of the underwater toffee factory he is standing on crumbles, that he is forced to realize what water truly is. Freeing. However, the freedom found in water is not without its challenges. BoJack, despite his revelation, finds it very difficult to stay afloat, as he grapples with the consequences of his actions and the responsibilities that comes with them. He struggles to break free of the cycle of making the same mistakes, ultimately making it difficult for him to keep his head above water. He quickly realizes that simply having freedom is not enough. One must exercise it to get the outcome they want, and that is much more difficult than he originally thought. Unable to deal with the responsibility granted by his radical freedom, BoJack spits in its face and adopts a deterministic viewpoint, blaming his childhood, various addictions, and anything else he can to convince himself that he is merely a product of his environment, and thus not at fault for his destructive actions.
I didn't do anything wrong because I can't do anything wrong. Because we're all just products of our environment, bouncing around like marbles in the game of Hungry Hungry Hippos that is our random and cruel universe.
Wait, no, that's not even what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's not my fault, it's society. Everything is because of society.
BoJack,
Dude, just let him.
He is exercising what Jean-Paul Sartre referred to as bad faith, or our natural capacity to deceive ourselves about our true nature. Oftentimes, it involves escaping into predefined roles and societal expectations as a means to pretend that we have no options, and that it is therefore acceptable to act in an inauthentic manner. Sartre believed it to be a denial of the freedom we all have, and the responsibility of understanding our authentic self that comes along with it. As he put in Existentialism in a Humanism,
those who conceal from themselves this total freedom, under the guise of solemnity, or by determinate excuses, I will call cowards. Others, who try to prove their existence is necessary, when man's appearance on earth is merely contingent, I will call bastards.
BoJack is certainly no stranger to bad faith, as it has impacted nearly every aspect of his life up until now. Just take a look at his relationships. He deceives himself into believing that he forms deep, lasting bonds with others, yet in reality, these relations are nothing more than superficial, meant to provide a semblance of connection without demanding the self-reflection that comes from genuine friendships and romantic partners. One such example is Princess Carolyn, his on-again, off-again partner of multiple years, who he is unwilling to support emotionally. He is willing to have sex with her, but when she goes through tough times, such as losing 2 major acting roles, he he won't stand by her side and try to work through the issue alongside her. He simply abandons her in her time of need because he refuses to emotionally invest himself in his relationships. As Princess Carolyn comes to realize,
you say you want professionalism? Bullshit. You want a mommy you can slide your dick in and out of.
I can want that and also want professionalism. A sex mommy who also keeps her boundaries? Is that too much to ask?
emotional investment requires a conscious engagement with one's feelings, thoughts, and vulnerabilities, i.e., self-awareness, something that BoJack desperately tries to avoid. He'd much rather have a partner that had boundaries and kept their distance emotionally. One could also look at BoJack's history of substance abuse. Satra would argue that his recurrent struggles are a coping mechanism, meant to help BoJack avoid confronting his authentic self. His frequent drug use also doubles as a means to avoid taking responsibility for his actions, circumventing his radical freedom. After all, if drugs alter a person's behavior, and BoJack is always under the influence of drugs, is he truly responsible for himself? Obviously, Satra, and most people with common sense, would argue yes, because he made the choice to abuse drugs. But BoJack would beg to differ. His reasoning doesn't have to hold up under scrutiny, it just has to appear plausible enough that he can use it to deceive himself. After adopting a deterministic viewpoint, BoJack ups his destructive behaviors several notches. He goes on long benders, pushes the people close to him further away, and drinks more alcohol than ever before. To assuage his self-guilt, he abuses his celebrity status, escaping into the predefined role of the washed-up celebrity with a troubled childhood. This convenient narrative provides him with a ready-made justification for his unsociable behavior, drug use, and other means of escapism by seamlessly aligning with societal expectations. It gives him a prepackaged means to explain away all of his self-destructive behavior as simply a consequence of being a celebrity with a difficult past, allowing him to escape confronting his authentic self.
BoJack is a damaged individual, struggling against a sea of demons, many self-created, but still all too real.
Finding success in using his celebrity status as a mask, BoJack slips even deeper into this persona in Season 3, as he shifts his focus towards the pursuit of an Oscar. Soren Kierkegaard's leap to faith described how individuals could choose to deeply affirm an idea or course of action despite a lack of evidence. A leap to faith goes beyond simple belief, requiring a radical, often irrational commitment to the ideal. Many associate this concept with Kierkegaard's beliefs surrounding religion, that to have true faith, one must trust in God despite the glaring lack of evidence. Kierkegaard also suggests that leaps to faith often arise from individuals seeking a higher meaning to overcome the existential despair that is human existence. He noted that individuals engaging in leaps to faith could create an illusion of fulfillment, irrationally believing that their chosen path would provide them with the meaning and purpose they sought. While Kierkegaard ultimately supported individuals making leaps to faith, he did recognize that they could be misused as a method of escapism, allowing an individual to disengage from their problems in life. In Season 3, BoJack's attempts to win an Oscar closely resembled a leap to faith. His sudden obsession with the Oscars had nothing to do with logical reasoning. Rather, it was driven by his own insecurities and a hope that winning it would somehow fill the existentialist void within him and somehow validate his entire existence. Furthermore, he used his fixation on the achievement to prevent himself from thinking about and having to face the deeper issues in his life, such as his crumbling personal relationships that came as a result of his self-destructive behaviors. It was a convenient distraction that allowed him to ignore the consequences of his past actions and thus avoid taking responsibility for them. During this time, BoJack is at the pinnacle of his self-deception. In his mind, an Oscar was the highest honor a celebrity could receive. To him, the Oscar was not simply an award. The external validation and prestige that it represented was a MacGuffin that he believed had the power to right every wrong brought on by his destructive behaviors, and finally bring him lasting happiness. However, this unsurprisingly does not work. When BoJack's hard work pays off and he officially becomes an Oscar nominee, he finds that he feels the exact same as before. It didn't change anything.
BoJack, you just got nominated for an Oscar. You're an Oscar nominee. How do you feel?
I feel the same.
Frustrated and confused, he turns to advice from his old pal, Cuddly Whiskers, who used to be a big-shot movie producer but abandoned his job in Hollywood to live out a peaceful, zen life in the mountains. Cuddly Whisker tells him,
"An Oscar is meaningless. It's all meaningless. It takes a long time to realize how truly miserable you are, and even longer to see that it doesn't have to be that way. Only after you give up everything can you begin to find a way to be happy."
This sentiment was echoed in an earlier episode by Mr. Peanut Butter, who, despite being the kind-hearted simpleton of the series, proves that underneath the go-lucky optimism is a deeply self-aware person. His oblivious cheerfulness and disregard about the serious nature of life is his way of dealing with the meaninglessness of the universe. As he tells Diane,
The universe is a cruel, uncaring void. The key to being happy isn't to search for meaning, it's to just keep yourself busy with unimportant nonsense, and eventually you'll be dead.
The reason why Mr. Peanut Butter and Cuddly Whiskers were able to find roads to happiness and BoJack was not, is because rather than getting stuck on the meaninglessness of life and turning to methods of deception like bad faith, they were able to move past it and adopt the philosophy of 20th century French thinker Albert Camus, which is absurdism. Camus believed that despite the fact that the universe is irrational and meaningless, humans are desperate to find reason and meaning inside of it. He coined this discrepancy the absurd, and posited that once you become aware of it, you only have three options. Suicide, like Secretariat and Season 3 BoJack, pushing it to the back of your mind and going about life as normal, like Todd and Princess Carolyn, or his preferred method, embracing the absurd and finding happiness in spite of it, like Cuddly Whiskers and Mr. Peanut Butter. The idea of rebelling against the absurd is featured in his famous essay, The Myth of Cepheus, a man who angered the gods and is punished by being forced to roll the same heavy boulder up a hill day after day, only to be forced to watch it inevitably roll back down to the bottom. Yet Cepheus is able to find happiness despite this absurd task. This myth is referenced in the show through the baboon, who jogs up the hill in front of BoJack's house every single day. Near the end of the show, the baboon explains to BoJack how one can find happiness while performing absurd tasks.
It gets easier.
Huh?
Every day it gets a little easier.
Yeah?
But you gotta do it every day. That's the hard part. But it does get easier.
Okay.
Absurdism and the previously mentioned philosophy of radical freedom are both existentialist-related philosophies that go hand in hand. BoJack must embrace both of them in order to find the purpose and happiness that he so deeply craves. And that is the note that the show ultimately leaves us on. The universe is an uncaring void. There is no God, no greater meaning, and no grand plan. There is only us and the choices we make. As you've likely guessed, the writers of BoJack Horseman subscribe to existentialism. Just like Sartre, They believed that no matter what an individual experienced in their past, they are responsible for every action they've ever taken, and that taking accountability for those actions is the key to exercising one's radical freedom. The writers also posit that everyone carries some form of baggage, be it their past experiences, addictions, or biological factors that act as hurdles in the way of utilizing one's radical freedom. The more baggage an individual has, the more hurdles are in their way. The show's main message is that in order to get rid of these hurdles and have a clear path towards radical freedom, one must take responsibility for their life choices. The show communicates this message very effectively. We empathize with BoJack from the start of the show, recognizing after Diane publishes his memoir that he genuinely realizes that he needs to change as a person. And BoJack tries, and tries, and tries, but is seemingly unable to succeed, no matter how much effort he puts in. He was trapped in a cruel cycle of trying to exercise his freedom and make better, less destructive choices, only to inevitably succumb to the influence of his baggage, his childhood trauma, addictive personality, enablement in his early career, etc., and fail. STEM people can imagine BoJack's progression as a cosine function. He helps his best friend fulfill his dream of creating a hit rock opera, then sabotages it in front of investors due to his fear of being alone. He takes his best friend to rehab, then ends her sobriety, and later leaves her to die of an overdose due to his fear of losing his fans. He built an orphanage, and then let $500,000 meant for charity burn despite Daniel Radcliffe because of his fear of being forgotten. It seemed like a never-ending cycle. Every time he tried to turn over a new leaf, he failed. As the viewers, we are along with BoJack on this ride. We want him to succeed. And for a long time, it's hard to understand why he can't. Is it because determinism is correct? Can BoJack really not rise above his past? But the show slowly reveals to us why his attempts to better himself are always doomed to end in failure. BoJack's mistake is that whenever he starts trying to exercise his freedom and be better, he pretends that he has a clean slate. He never actually holds himself accountable for his actions. Whenever he apologizes to people, he never says that he is sorry for doing what he did. He says that he is sorry for being made to act that way. The cycle continued because BoJack only embraced half of radical freedom, the part where nothing was stopping him from changing his life going forwards, and ignoring the part where he was responsible for everything he has done up until the present. Here is a clip of him apologizing to Todd.
You need to be better.
I know, and I'm sorry, okay? I was drunk, and there was all this pressure with the Oscar campaign. But now that it's over, I
No!
BoJack never believes that he is at fault for the choices he makes. There is always an external force for him to blame. And because he always engages in bad faith and never holds himself accountable, he never accepts his authentic self, and thus can never fully exercise his radical freedom and escape from the influence of his baggage. As outside viewers with no real stake, we can see why BoJack is falling short. It is extremely frustrating for us that BoJack doesn't seem to be able to understand, but the show does an exceptional job of telling his story and the various factors that blind him, so while we don't like it, we can understand why. BoJack's journey comes to a head in the penultimate episode, where BoJack reaches his lowest low yet. After some of his deepest secrets are revealed to the world on live TV, he breaks into his old house after consuming a cocktail of drugs and falls unconscious face down in his old pool. Teetering on the brink of death, he enters a drug-induced hallucination, a surreal gathering with deceased friends and family, serving as a somber Last Supper. His worst mistakes, deepest regrets, and darkest secrets are all laid bare, leaving BoJack with seemingly no choice but to confront his authentic self. Yet even with all of the evidence laid out in front of him, BoJack refuses to take full responsibility for his actions, defaulting yet again to the comfort of blaming his circumstances. Then, at the end of the episode, he realizes that the whole event was simply a way of his body processing his death as it slowly began to shut down.
Has anyone ever come back from this place?
BJ, there is no place. It's just your brain going through what it feels like it has to go through. All you can do right now is sit back and enjoy the show.
This was BoJack's last chance to shed his baggage and finally be free, and due to his inability to hold himself accountable, he fumbles it. He tries to escape, but death is relentless. It seems like the end for BoJack, but at the last minute, he is rescued by the house's new owners. He is arrested, and while he is technically only charged with breaking and entering, in reality, his sentence is a reflection of everything that he has done over the series.
What are you in for again?
Officially breaking and entering, but I think it was kind of for everything.
After 7 seasons of being able to escape both external and internal accountability for his actions, the justice system steps in and holds him responsible for everything that he has done. It succeeds where all else has failed. And finally, the cycle is broken. Going to prison broke down all of the barriers he used to hide from accountability. He could no longer engage in bad faith. He had no choice but to realize that he, BoJack Horseman, was responsible for everything that he had done. This change in perspective is showcased in the show's final episode, where BoJack is released from prison on a break to attend Princess Carolyn's wedding. His final interactions with long-term friends reveal that the shadows of his past no longer torment him. He no longer hides behind his circumstances to justify his actions. He holds himself responsible and is rewarded with his radical freedom. Although the show concludes before we can witness him exercise this freedom, it is clear that he is on a path towards recovery. Rising above circumstance is not a trivial thing to do, especially for an individual like BoJack who has been through so much. For that reason, at no point during the show do his choices to not take responsibility for his actions feel contrived for the purpose of the plot. He always makes the choices that align best with his character, keeping the story believable. The show also avoids falling into the trap that many similar shows do by not romanticizing his mental illnesses or infantilizing him as a result. The show simultaneously acknowledges that BoJack is unwell and that he has more control over his situation than he believes. Comparable characters with destructive tendencies like Walter White, Tony Soprano, or Hank Moody had their mental illnesses used as a tool to make them seem like cool and enviable characters. As a result, they are rarely held accountable for their actions. BoJack, on the other hand, serves as a cautionary tale, showing how destructive mental illness and a lack of accountability can be, turning somebody into their own worst enemy. Many shows allow their characters to get away with whatever they want, but BoJack, despite his very best attempts to avoid it, is always held completely responsible for his failings. Yet even though he is held accountable, the show holds steadfast that he still has self-worth, is worthy of love, and has the capability to change. It's a noble message that one's mistakes in the past do not define their future. But while BoJack Horseman has many successes, it does have one major flaw. The show relies far too heavily on external consequences, such as damaged relationships, career setbacks, or legal repercussions, as the way characters are made to be held responsible for their actions. Very rarely do characters ever hold themselves accountable for their actions and start utilizing their radical freedom without external stimuli forcing them to. Some examples are BoJack needing to go to jail to fix his destructive behaviors, Princess Carolyn needing to lose her most loyal employee and confidant to dial back her workaholism, and Diane needing a divorce to take steps to fix her mental health. In my opinion, it would have been far more compelling if the show had some of these characters having an internally driven motivation for change. We did see this with some side characters like Cuddly Whiskers, who retired in the mountains after deep meditation on the negative effects of the movie industry, but not with any main characters. At the beginning of this video, I posed a question. Can we truly hold people accountable and punish them for their actions? And the answer to this question ultimately comes down to whether you are a hard determinist or an existentialist, and your resulting stance on free will. And unfortunately, like most philosophical questions, there really isn't a definite answer. If there was, it wouldn't be philosophy, it would be a science. However, what I can tell you is that every character from BoJack Horseman, BoJack especially, had some kind of trauma in their lives that affected their decision-making skills. At the beginning of the show, each of the cast members felt like leaves in the wind, carried aimlessly through life by external forces. Yet one by one, the show holds them culpable for their past behaviors, forcing them to realize that while they couldn't control their circumstances, they did have the agency to shape their response. So according to the writers of BoJack Horseman, in alignment with Western ideals, the answer to that philosophical question is yes. People can be held accountable.